Test 1, 2. No one has to worry about it.
So the first four are the ones that Karen sent.
I think she sent those a while back.
She did. Yeah.
Hello?
I'll go off and eat that until we're good to go. I figured I'd take one thing off. So free
Welcome everybody to our Wednesday keynote session here at Ignite Innovation Showcase. We've had a great day, another really busy day. Today we had the 16th annual Undergraduate Research and Creative Expression Symposium. The building was full of 200 students talking about their research and creativity throughout the building. We also had the Make to Innovate Lab Challenge today, and we'll be announcing those prizes at the end of the keynotes. It's been the College of Design Dean Charette was going on today, so a lot of activities going on throughout the building. Don't forget we have Thursday and Friday as well, more activities going on throughout the week. It's just been a fantastic week so far, and I'm really thrilled tonight for a distinguished panel of innovators that we are going to enjoy, and we'll open it up to questions as we get rolling. And then we have a great keynote speaker coming up as well. So a great program tonight. Thanks you all for coming. With this, I would like to introduce our moderator, Dean Spalding. Is the Dean of the Ivy College of Business, as well as the Interim Director of Interim Vice President of Economic Development and Industry Relations. In his spare time, he runs a college as well. So David Spalding is our Dean of the Ivy College, and he will moderate the session today. David, with that, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jim. It's really a pleasure to be here, be part of Ignite Week. A lot of exciting things going on here all over the building with students, faculty, and staff all engaged. This is what we love to see with this wonderful Student Innovation Center. So I'm going to start actually by asking the panelists to introduce themselves rather than providing introductions. So Mohammed, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure thing. And thank you so much for having me, David. My name is Mohammed. I'm a technology advisor as well as an angel investor. And as of 2 weeks ago, I took on an additional role as the Chief Technology Officer at a company in Singapore.
Outstanding. I love people who take on additional roles. I found that it works for me, so great to meet a fellow dual role guy. So, Gopi.
Thank you. I'm an Iowa State University graduate. I think that's the most important introduction. Did my master's and PhD in 1990 to 96. Worked in the US after that in San Antonio, Texas. So 12 years total in the US, electromagnetics and AI, that's my background. Then I went back to India, Bangalore. I led the GE India technology teams when I left GE in 2014, and then moved to the Tata Group as the group CTO. I'm now running my own AI company, and very happy to be here.
Outstanding. Narayan.
Thank you. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from Iowa. No, I'm actually from this place called Hyderabad in India. But I am an Iowa State graduate, year 2001, in one of the farthest buildings on campus if you're not in engineering. I was a graduate of the Greenlee School of Journalism and Mass Comm in Hamilton Hall, all the way back there. Not too far from the Creamery, I'm told, so that's a reason to go there if you want to. I finished here, moved to New York, worked there for a year, managed to avoid 9/11, moved to Madison, Wisconsin, almost did a PhD there, but decided I was not cut out to be an academic. Worked for 4 years in Milwaukee in advertising, and I continue to be in the field of advertising. I'm currently the chief client officer for a Japanese company called Dentsu International, and I oversee what is called the bringing together through radical collaboration of about 3,000 people in the company in India. Obviously, easier said than done. It's always work in progress. It's fantastic to be back here on campus, seeing all of the things that have stayed the same and so many of the things that have changed. This feels like home again, and wonderful to be here.
By the way, we know each other, but we met for the first time here. So his brother and myself, we were here at the same time.
That's what I love about Iowa State. You know, brings the alumni back, the connections that are built across the years. It's really outstanding. So, you know, I'd like each of you to talk a little bit about your leadership role and how you specifically lead innovation within your current roles. So, Mohammed, you want to kick that off?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my capacity as an advisor as well as an investor, my job predominantly is to work with the startups and the founders. So basically, spending a lot of time on evaluating the startups and the ideas, providing feedback in terms of the strategy, spending a lot of time really coaching and mentoring the founders, which are pretty much the catalyst behind any successful business. I also work very closely with VCs on advising them in terms of their product and technology strategy. Excuse me. In my capacity as a chief technology officer, my predominant role is to focus on building high efficient engineering organizations, to work along with my team on building, solving complicated technology problems, but also on building products that are used by our customers, and also to be able to solve the customers' pain points. The key, what I found out is one of the key aspects to foster innovation is to create an environment, particularly a safe environment, where we empower people to take bold bets, to make choices and decisions that might cause them to fail, and to kind of give them the opportunity and the framework to learn from that experience and coach, and to try to coach them along the way. And by having that environment and by giving them the resources and capabilities to grow and learn, I found out that usually will result in growth, both at the individual level as well as the organization level, and will drive innovation along the way.
Outstanding. Gopi?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a startup now, so I have to do everything, I guess, but not really. But even in my roles with larger companies, I work like a startup. So the role in innovation is to make sure that you have the right team working on the right processes, getting access to the customers, and hence giving innovative outputs. The way you go about doing it might have a certain few flavors. What worked for me is to articulate that as leaders, we are either creating, nurturing, or changing. And that's a continuum. So when you're creating, the mindset which goes with that is that of freedom. And so you need to create a safe space, be it for your teams or be it for your partners. And when you're nurturing, and that's actually the significant portion of the time for any innovator, any innovative company, you need to do it with passion. So you need to let the teams know that an idea is good, but really it's only as good as you can take it to the market, and make them aware that it takes time to do that. So that phase of nurture, you need to bring your leadership skills in a different way, and bring that patience, share that patience with the team. And finally, when you're most successful, as an individual or as a company, you need to drive change, or you'll be a one-time innovator.
Very true. Narayan?
I tend to be the stand-up comedian in the room, so I'm going to try and perpetuate that a little bit. I work in advertising, and there's a legend in New York advertising called Jerry Della Femina, and he gave what is arguably one of the best descriptions of advertising. He said, it's the most fun you can have with your clothes on. I'm not going to take my clothes off. But I do get to do a lot of fun stuff, including wearing non-matching socks and red shoes. I mean, I'm in Iowa State. I can do that. But perpetuating that is not my only contribution, hopefully. There is something that's somewhat different from what Gopi and Mohammed have spoken about, which is that in our business, in actually any services business, you can get into a rut of becoming a service seller. And by doing that, and by everybody doing that, you can tend to just become a commodity. And then you just price undercutting, and there is no room for innovation. And that mindset has been perpetuated for decades, if not almost a century, in our business. And one of the things that I've been trying to contribute to break that is to orient ourselves to be a solutions business rather than a services business. Not start with saying, here's what I have, and this is how much it's going to cost. Do you want it? but instead asking, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And here's a way for us to tell you how we can solve it better for you in a way that's more meaningful, not just for you, but for your customers as well. So the solutions versus services mindset is one thing I've been pushing. The other is, I think, it's maybe somewhat unique to our field as well. A lot of innovation hinges on specialism. Our business hinges on a lot of generalists coming to the fore. So being a jack of many trades is actually a great thing if you're in advertising, because what you can do is connect a lot of dots from various fields in the endeavor to change behavior. Because ultimately, what you want is for people to behave and adopt new habits versus what they've been used to in the past. That's what innovation success is about, right? It's not just creating something new, but creating something better that people want to adopt. And so that's the other thing that we try to get to.
Outstanding. Just to let each of you know, there is now a bottle of water at your bottom of your chair. So I think there was a demand for water. So
that was mine.
So next, for all innovators, there are challenges. There are always challenges. So why don't you talk a little bit about some of the specific human challenges that you face as an innovator? And you each have talked a little bit about that in that last question, but talk a little bit more specifically, especially as you think of younger people coming in and working for you. What are the challenges that you face in that regard?
Yeah, so I'll touch base on a challenge of each based on my experience in the startup space. On the human side, probably one of the biggest challenges is to drive change in people's behavior and to kind of be able to increase the adoption of the solution or the product that you're bringing to the market. And that's particularly the case if you're the first mover. The ability to break a habit, especially if it's a habit that is occurring at scale, if it's a habit that has been consistently going on for a long period of time, can be quite a challenge. And I'll share an example from my own experience. When I was in charge of the technology practice at Bukalapak, which is an e-commerce player in Southeast Asia, we launched this program using technology that allowed pop-and-mom stores across Southeast Asia to benefit from customer insights, improved supply chain capabilities, and we also provide them with the ability to provide additional services to their customers. They were able now to pay the electricity bills and the phone bills for their customers. They can do money transfers as well. So there were a lot of benefits, and when you kind of think about it from a conceptual standpoint, it was quite clear that this is a solution that is going to work and that it should work quite quickly. But when you take a step back and you really think about it, you're dealing with millions of people that have been used to doing business in a certain way. You're asking them to learn a new technology, to adopt a new way of doing things. And that change, and in terms of the scope of it, can be quite intimidating. So that's probably, I would say, is one of the key challenges on the human side when you're thinking of driving change. On the technology side, there's been a trend for a pretty long period of time of identifying tasks that we can automate and drive efficiency through that automation. And that trend, I think, will continue to be the case. And pretty much as we go after and tackle more complicated tasks and try to automate those, we'll have to work on solving more and more complicated technology problems. And a really good example of that is machine learning and the increase of adoption in machine learning in some of the problems that we are that the technology space is currently working on, and I think Gopi can probably talk a bit more about that as well. So the challenge there is that as we try to push that frontier further, is how we can continuously try to innovate to solve problems that we probably haven't been able to solve yet.
Sure. So I'll go with the technology challenge first. And again, it's somewhat specific to our industry, but also not necessarily. And it's to do with the pervasiveness of data, which on the outside seems like a good thing, right? The more data you have, the more you can understand how the world works, how people work. But it's actually going in a direction that is not necessarily the best. So let me illustrate that with a specific example from the advertising business. Again, I'm not presuming familiarity over here of everyone with the business, but if you followed or even just watched any ads any time in your life, I think it's fair probably to say that for decades, we've been accused of stretching the limits of morality, right? So we tempt young people, we make people do what they don't want to do, we ask people to buy what they shouldn't be buying. So we make temptation almost irresistible. So we've been stretching the limits of morality, and that's the worst we've done until now. But what we're doing with data now is stretching the limits of the law. Right? I mean, the privacy question is only the tip of the iceberg. But there's so much more risk at play over here with not just the misuse of data, but also just with ignorance about what the data can be used for. Even more is actually willfully using it to overinterpret how people work. There's a writer called Dan Ariely, and he most succinctly says, it's a mistake to believe people are rational creatures. At best, we are predictably irrational. Right? So we need to remember that, but also we need to remember there are some unchanging things. I mean, it's, again, another advertising legend called Bill Bernbach said, it's fashionable to think of changing humans, right? And all the things that are so rapidly changing about us and about culture. But we forget that for millennia, we've just been driven by the same codes that have always driven us. We're still driven by anger and jealousy and envy and passion and sex and love and sadness and grief. That's not changed, no matter what the technology is of the day or the cultural fad of the day is. And the cookieless future that's coming is telling us that, again, we are at risk of over-interpreting data, with first-party data being so abundant. So what we want to be doing is balancing the scale between what the data can tell us and how we act upon it. So that is the interplay between both the technical and the technological and the human challenges, I would say.
Yeah, if I can add, I believe that humans are extremely creative and also hence extremely innovative. There are barriers which come up along the way, and I would place them in this manner. So there are people who are extremely good with the way they work with their hands. There are people who are extremely good the way they use their minds. There are some other people who are extremely good the way they understand the markets. As long as it remains in these silos, then we have a challenge. I'll tell you that in countries, including UK, but of course in India, these were communities over generations. People who worked with their hands, people who worked with their minds, and people who understood the markets. So if you have that, you can still innovate if the innovation is based on, let's say, the richness of the raw material from the land. But if you have to innovate in a constrained environment, these barriers have to go. And it's very difficult for these barriers to suddenly go. That's where some of the industrial revolution advantages came when you were able to bring these three elements together. One other aspect on the human side is the focus on results in the present-day corporations. You cannot do anything about results. So if you break down results into actions and you work on those actions, you can do something. And those actions, if they don't produce the right results, you can come back and tweak the actions. But really, that's another challenge, is that people tend to focus on the results, and they're constantly chasing their tail.
So you are looking out at the next generation of innovators. So as they launch out of Iowa State here, somebody's looking around and says, where? You are the next generation of innovators. So as you think about what they're going to face, what particular advantages do they have coming into the field now? And what particular challenges will they have as they try to become innovators out in the real world? Narayana? No, Narayana. No, go ahead, Mohammed. All right.
All right, cool. The couple of advantages that come to mind is how much information is available out there. And I think through the availability of the internet, there is a lot of information in terms of just basically content, online material, online classes. In that access to information, I'm not sure that as a humankind, we have experienced that before. The second advantage is that technology has also not only provided easier access to information, but also provided easier access to opportunities as well. Now you can work remote, you can collaborate with people across the globe, a lot easier than what basically happened in the past. On the challenges side is to stay on the same kind of theme of technology. Technology is going to present us with opportunities, but will also present us with challenges as well. And as we adopt more advanced technologies, they will potentially make some of the current skills less important and less relevant. But also at the same time, they'll create opportunities to acquire and adopt a new type of skill set. And I think that's probably a constant challenge where, from like a mindset standpoint, we need to understand that education and learning is not just a stage that you experience during your childhood. It's pretty much a lifelong journey. And you can make the argument that, okay, we should preserve the jobs that we have now. But when you look at it from a slightly different perspective, it would be such an unfortunate waste if we keep people static, doing the same thing that they do, instead of training them and giving them the opportunity to provide value at a higher level and using very creative ways. Evolution, or I guess revolution, despite the fact, when you look at the Industrial Revolution or the Information Revolution, we tend to think of it as something that is driven by technology. But when you really look at the essence of it, it's something that is driven by the growth and the evolution of the human being themselves that caused that technology to be there in the first place and to increase its adoption. From a challenges standpoint, I would argue that now more than ever, the need to be a lifelong learner is something that is extremely key.
Should I? Yeah. The opportunity, I think, David, is speed, right? You can innovate at a pace which was previously just not possible. So just this afternoon, somebody was mentioning microfluidics. So you could conduct an entire design of experiment on a microfluidic base, add AI to that for selecting the right next experiments to conduct, and you can invent and produce materials into the market very quickly. Previously, it used to take 20 years. Similarly, you have the open source revolution, right? So I just am amazed that I give a problem to solve, which seems very complicated to a young team, and they're done in a day. And I'm like wondering how, and there's open source for most things. If not, you just tweak something and you're almost there, right? So there are elements like this which give the ability to innovate at speed. So this is a fantastic time to be innovating. The counter to that is when you're innovating at speed, you also need to be conscious about sustainability, the planet, the environment, however you put it. So we need to make sure that we include, in addition to human health and wellness, the health of everything else on the planet.
I'm going to be a little long-winded here, I think, after all this succinct.
You just said that about me?
No, I am going to be long-winded, is what I said. Just to add to the opportunities, I think it's absolutely amazing that the cost of failure is so low now. You have the bandwidth to experiment, fail a lot, fail fast, and then find what you need to get to without it costing an arm and a leg, literally. But the flip side is what I want to focus on, the challenges, right? And I'm addressing you directly as the people who will be creating innovations for the future. There's a little exercise that I do when I do innovation workshops, and I do them with all kinds of cohorts. And it's not something that I invented. It was a leadership coach in the US who had first created this. And the exercise is, I give groups boxes of matchboxes with matchsticks in them, and I ask them to make the tallest vertical tower using matchsticks, right? And there's a lot of creative answers that come about. So somebody lays them out in a straight line on the ground and says it's a matter of perspective. If you lie down on the floor and look at it, it's vertical. Some others use the matchboxes and stack them up. There are a few who put like 4 or 5 layers of beds of matchsticks and make something about a couple of inches tall. And unfailingly, every single time, the group that makes the tallest vertical tower are kindergartners, okay? Because when you hand out the matchboxes to them, they ask, could we have some glue, please? While the adults just go away and start trying to solve the problem without fully understanding what the possibilities can be. And I think we're witnessing some of that in the rush for what is passing off as innovation these days, right? In India, for example, right now, there is this craze to get everything into an under 10-minute delivery time, right? From groceries to food to anything. And nobody is stopping to ask, who are these people who need this 10-minute delivery, right? And what is it doing to the employees? What is it doing to, what are you living your life having everything at your disposal at 10 minutes for? And so nobody's stopping to ask the questions whether this is even something that we need. And so that's the first thing I would ask you. Do we really need this? Do we need another Uber of, I don't know, soybeans? Maybe we don't need that, right? So that's the first question I'll ask you to ask yourself. The second is, for decades now, we've not had an innovation shortage. But to build on Gopi's point, what we do have is progress shortage. There isn't equitable progress across the board, whatever social cohort you take, right? So are we doing enough to bridge that progress gap? And can we do more in order to do that, right? So that's the second challenge that I think I would pose to you and to all of us.
Thank you. So, I've got some more questions I could ask, but I want to turn to the audience and see if anybody in the audience has a question for the panel.
So, adding upon your discussion about the 10-minute delivery, so I feel that most of the innovations, because of the competition, they try to go ahead of the competition and be first in the market. And because of this need, and also another need that every company has to show progress year on year. For example, if I take an example of Netflix, just past week it mentioned that it lost 200,000 subscribers and suddenly shares fell. So the reason it lost is because of the Russia war, but no one understands from that perspective. They actually got 500,000 more subscribers, but no one looks from that perspective. Suddenly the shares fall. So in order to be first in the market, people try to come up with ideas that they feel that, okay, this one will help us to become better in the market. But talking about that 10-minute delivery, the persons who deliver are humans, right? So they, because of that Indian roads, they are pretty much have a lot of traffic jams and those. So they risk their lives in order to do that. So how does this moral factor, why does companies not look at this moral factor, and what can be done to emphasize on that part, that it is the moral duty of the company to ensure that the humans' lives are not at stake when they come up with some ideas?
I cannot resist saying this. Companies are not people. People are people. So it's up to us. It's up to you if you're going to set something up to do something about it. Gopi spoke eloquently about this obsession with results, right? And this is where I'll probably ask us to nuance the difference between growth and progress. As somebody wiser than I once said, growth for the sake of growth is the motto of the cancer cell. That does not equal to progress. So progress means looking out for some of these moral questions and finding the answers to that as you create something better. So yeah, absolutely, you are the people who need to be thinking about it. Why do people, or why do companies not think about it? Because of the obsession with results, whether it's to the shareholders or to the market or to the company itself.
Hello, I'm Suresh Kothari. You talked about obsession with results and progress, and they are, I think, related, and I want to ask a question. You know, the education happens in academic institutions, and if you look at the academic institutions, the culture has changed. You know, a professor or a PhD students get evaluated on how many papers you have published, not what is the depth of that paper or what impact that paper is going to have. And if you look at the science and engineering 50 years before the Second World War and 50 years after the Second World War, we have become, you know, selfish scientists. We want instant, you know, results. And so what is your view? You know, we talk about information technology, that information technology came from years of work before the Second World War. What do you think is going on in science and engineering that is going to fuel the next quantum jump?
Yeah, I can, Professor Kothari, thanks for the question. Yeah, of course, there are things like the H index and the I index, which try to look at the citation and maybe have a proxy for the quality of the paper. But that in turn, I know that you know, in some places can be fixed by students quoting the papers of their faculty and so on and so forth. But I'm sure that good universities like Iowa State, the focus is on the right quality of research. But to your question on what is happening now in terms of deep research, which will hold us good in the future, I think there are a few areas. You may use the word quantum jump, but quantum computing itself is one. I do believe that its time is not anywhere soon, because quantum computing is not applicable to every problem to be solved. It can solve certain niche problems very well. So that's one area of research. In computing itself, if I continue, there are things like generative adversarial networks, which are just beginning to show results of being able to reproduce new Picassos, for example. So the creative area will maybe explode with those kind of areas. I'll shift to materials. So things like metamaterials, these are all been there for some time, but they have not really lived up to their expectations. Graphene as a material has wonderful properties which can help with sustainability as well. It takes a long time to get it out into the market. We created a factory for graphene, and so it is real now, and it is being sold in the market. It's being used to coat steel. So there are some material research work which will also impact the future. But I think the greatest opportunity and the greatest advances are in the age of biology. We are in the age of biology. The amount of advances that we have seen in the ability to understand genes, the ability to manipulate genes, human genes, plant genes, animal genes, produce vaccines, mRNA vaccines, this is unprecedented, and this is a sign that innovation has gone nowhere. deep research has gone nowhere. Yes, there's a lot of noise.
Other thoughts? Or next question.
What would you guys say are the most important skills to develop professionally?
So when I was maybe like earlier in my career, the thought process that I had is that the technical skill set is probably the most important thing. If you have the technical capability to solve a problem, then that can make you quite valuable in the market. As I grew a little bit older and maybe hopefully a little bit wiser, I kind of realized the value of storytelling. If let's say you have an idea in mind and you need people to come and work with you, or you need investors to come and support you, if you have the technical knowledge to solve the problem, but you can't communicate why this problem is important to be solved in the first place, why you're the right person to solve the problem, and why do people who are going to come and work with you should leave their jobs, maybe sacrifice some of their time that they were supposed to spend with their family and friends during the late nights and weekends, that they should make those sacrifices and come to work with you. The technical knowledge by itself is not going to be sufficient. And I think there is there is an immense value of the power of influencing people for the right reasons. And I think storytelling can be quite effective in doing so.
So I'll add, initially in your career, creativity and expertise will help you grow. And then definitely as you become a manager or influencing a large number of people, you need to be inclusive, you need to be a clear thinker. The ability to articulate, the ability to tell stories, but ability to communicate, which means your message is getting across. And finally, you need to be externally focused. You need to understand the world around you.
So my two additions would be empathy. So put yourself in the shoes of the person you're creating for. You're not creating for yourself, right? So always ask the question from the other person's point of view, what's in it for me? Right? They're not waiting for your innovation. Nobody's saying, okay, there's somebody sitting at Iowa State who's going to create something new and I can't wait for it. If it is good for them, that's when they'll adopt it, right? So building on Mohammed's earlier point about behavior change as the foundation, I think that's key. The other I've found increasingly just very valuable is this perspective change that I had about the source of innovation. I used to search for it in the periphery. I mean, we call it cutting edge or leading edge, right? But I've increasingly found that the most fertile source of innovation is the obvious. Because we take the obvious for granted, we don't question it enough. But if you question it enough, then it'll yield something dramatically useful.
Thank you, gentlemen. Yes.
Hello, I'm Sadi. I have a question. Like if you have an innovative idea like a startup, based on your experience, what time is good to run your idea? After graduation and making some connections or during graduation? And the other point is that what degree is required? I mean, which degree is better, a master degree or a PhD degree?
I can share, I guess, my experience. In terms of degrees, I wouldn't really think about it from a degree standpoint. I would think about it from the skill set that you as a founder or you as an entrepreneur should have in order to be able to solve the problem that you're trying to solve. If you can get that skill through a degree, that's great. If you can get that through any kind of experience that you would get, I think that is okay too. So it's more on the capability of solving the problem as opposed to the actual degree. In terms of the time, there are successful founders who have started companies when they were in college. There are successful founders who have started companies when they were in grad school, in their 20s, in their 30s, 40s, or 50s. So there's really no gap or limitation, I would say, on innovation. Having said that, statistics have shown that people who have a bit more experience in their career tend to be more successful, just because they have the networks, they have the connection, they have some of the hands-on experience, so they have additional resources that they can come with, and that gives them a slight advantage. But if you have a great idea and if you have the passion to go after it, I would say there's no time like the present.
I'll just add that an important element, if you're doing a startup, is the ability to build a team. That you need those 3-4 people who are pillars on whom you'll build the rest of the organization. So you need to be in a position to draw a good set of people, as good as you, to run and start a company.
Yeah, I'll just add a plug for Dean Spalding and the business school, but knowing how to run a business, not just innovate, not just create something that's useful, is an invaluable skill, and very few have that, and it's worth investing in either the people, like Gopi said, who can help you do that, or acquiring the skills to make sure you know how to run it as a successful business.
So I'm going to catch that ball and run with it. We actually are launching this fall a Master's of Entrepreneurship degree in the Ivy College of Business, and that degree is really going to be designed to help students during their time with us either develop their own idea or connect with scientists here who've developed discoveries and are looking for a business partner to get a business started. The coursework that you'll do will help provide you better grounding in business, but it's a great way to put you in a position to launch a career. I owe you $20. Yes?
Yeah, humans are pretty selfish, and we tend to like to gatekeep our ideas, especially if they're good ones. How can leaders encourage, promote, incentivize people sharing ideas, especially within like businesses, salaried employees who aren't particularly in innovative positions?
Yeah, so I'll emphasize again, an idea is a great starting point for innovation, but it's just that, it's a starting point. I think it's important to emphasize that within the teams. And I've never found that by sharing an idea, you diminish it or somebody is ready to take it and run with it, because it takes so much effort to take an idea further, right? So actually your idea will only multiply and get stronger, and it'll become real if it is worth it. So that message has to be given through examples, through living it, I guess. But I can't emphasize enough that keeping an idea to yourself is a sure way to kill it.
I'm going to sound like the guy with the hammer to whom everything looks like a nail. But I see everything from the point of view of understanding people and deciphering them, right? And I'll give you an example of how to get people to work with you by appealing to even their baser instincts, if you will, right? I'm pretty sure all of you here have heard about the ice bucket challenge that happened a few years ago, right? I mean, I'm willing to wager a bet that if I ask you to tell me what ALS stands for, most of us in the room wouldn't know, right? But we all took up the challenge, and we all gave money that added up to $330 million for that campaign, right? Why did we do that? Did we individually know somebody who was affected by ALS? We didn't. What that campaign did was appeal to our narcissism. It said, look, I'm a good person, I'm a generous person, and here's video proof of it. Right? And that's okay to use it to good ends, right? And sometimes we forget we can do that. So manipulate people for all you want.
If it's okay to add, yeah. I would say the tendency of not sharing ideas come from the belief that if I share my idea, then I'm going to lose value. And what we tend to forget is that there's value of trying to share that information and to share that idea, because it helps you establish and build a network. And then if you share your ideas through that network, you establish trust. And then you'll start with time receiving some of the information and some new ideas back your way. And the value of that information flow is immensely important. And from like a long-term standpoint, that's going to be in your best of interest, in the people, in the best of interest of the people that you establish through your network, and it's in the best of interest in the ecosystem as a whole.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Do you find a gap between industry and academia in terms of the kind of problems industries are working on or trying to solve, and the kind of research going on at universities level? And if you find a gap, then do you have any suggestions at academia level, like what they can improve or work on?
Yeah, I think the gap should be there, not a gap necessarily, but a difference. Nobody else focuses on, let's say, 5 to 10 years from today, what should be happening than the academic world, and they should continue to do that. Maybe around the 5 to 7 year range, the university can fund it, right? The industry can fund it. But the 7 to 10 year range, it's the academic world, the government funding and things like that, which will really differentiate us into the future. Now, you have the 1 year horizon, that has to be purely industry, obviously. What happens next year? Maybe there is some help we can get from academia, but really it's our responsibility. And 3 to 5 years is a gray area where I guess everybody can play. But I think that there is a continuum, there is a role only academia plays, there is a role only industry plays.
I couldn't have put it more beautifully. There is a lag between academia and industry, and it's the industry that's behind, not academia.
Yes. Oh, you're up.
What is the role of the arts and the humanities in innovative problem solving? And if you could use some examples from your work and show, like, how did you bring the moral and the ethical question as to, we're looking at what good innovation is bringing now, but how do we think critically, and what bad it might bring maybe several years down the line? How do you convince your clients to look at that end of the spectrum as well? If you could give some examples, that would be great. Thank you.
Is that 2 questions? The arts also you wanted us to cover, or just, yeah?
You're going to throw it to the advertising guy?
So I'll just start with AI, since that's my field, and there's a lot of questions around ethics and bias and things like that. It is true, if you train AI, let's say, to interview and hire a person, and if it is trained with data which is biased to hiring, let's say, male gender, the AI will obviously replicate what it has been trained to do in the process. But it is easier to remove bias, identify and remove bias in AI and in the data that it uses, rather than in the humans that it's been trained on. So there is enough work going on in looking at ethics in AI, ethics in technology, and every technology has a definite potential negative use. At the same time, it has significant potential to take us forward. So the AI example which I gave you is from experience, from our work. Even privacy. So today, let's say that there is algorithm which is built with your facial information, with your picture. And tomorrow you come and, not tomorrow, let's say next year, you say, I don't want my data, but the algorithm has already been trained. Your data is no longer there, it's in the weights and biases of the neural network. But you say, no, you used my data to train the network, so remove it. So how do you do it? Because the network has been trained for, sometimes many weeks to build a facial recognition system or look at emotions or something like that. So you can do that today. You can go and retrain the network only on 10% of the data, because you already know the final state you want it to be. So that's on the ethics piece. It's always going to be the humans who will think about what are the ethics issues, and then technology can solve for it. There's no difficulty there. The irresponsibility is not of the technology. no amount of technology can compensate for irresponsible behavior, right? So it is the humans that we have to look at rather than the technology. Now, on the arts question, what can arts do for innovation? I think today our understanding of creativity has just increased quite a bit. And even the ability to put a person in the mode of thinking creatively can come from just having the person flip a painting and paint in a most uncomfortable way, using a brush, holding it at the tip, no lines. So this puts you in a pattern spatial mode, which is more lucrative, more you get more proficient in your ideas, even in technology. I don't know if that was the question on the arts, but I attempted at least.
I think, David, we have time for one more question, or did you want to? Narayan, go ahead.
If there is time.
I say throw it to the advertising.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about the role of the arts and the humanities a lot more, but I'll give you an example that tells you both the positive and the negative sides of it, right? So, and this has nothing to do with technology. I think there are preeminent masters here of that. There's a New York investment firm called State Street Global, okay? And they actually picked up a very global human question, which is all pervasive, which is the question of gender equality in leadership positions in Wall Street firms, okay? And so they wanted to do something that would really heighten the conversation around it and do something meaningful. The result of that thinking was what today is a permanent fixture in New York City, which is the statue of the fearless girl, if you remember that, right? So that was meant to embody the spirit of female power empowerment, right? And with that campaign, State Street Global actually created a fund which would back women-led entrepreneurial companies. And the fund attracted some $370 million. Okay, so far so good. The power of innovation, bringing big questions from a humanities point of view, solving for it with persuasive thinking and actions. And then, as it turned out, State Street Global got sued because they did not have adequate representation of women in their own leadership. Right? So both, as Gopi said, the possibility of ingenuity as well as the irresponsibility of that is very human.
All right, gentlemen, so I'm going to ask you for one parting piece of advice to our guests.
So I guess have fun, learn, and enjoy life.
There you go. That's good. Others?
Mohammed?
I would say you only live once, so just kind of do what you like, do what you love, but also at the same time, think about what kind of footprint you want to leave when it's all said and done, and use that as a basis of the vision of life.
Yeah, take your work seriously. Don't take yourself seriously.
Great. Well, let's give our panelists a great round of applause. Thank them so much for sharing with us today. Came from around the world to do this. So thank you, gentlemen. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
So David, I think you're up for the introduction of our speaker. So the rest of you gentlemen can excuse yourselves. I thought I met Gopi for the first time this afternoon, but it turns out he took a class from me 30 years ago, literally 30 years ago, and his wife also took a class, the same class. I don't know if that's where you met. Is that where you met? But all right, so it wasn't quite a love match, but they both took a class and have fond memories of it, and I hope it served. I can take credit for all of his success because he took a class from me. But, yeah, there you go. So go ahead, David.
I feel like any introduction I would give at this point is, anticlimax, because that's a great story. So, Dr. Gopi Katragadda is the founder and CEO of Myelin Foundry, an artificial intelligence company with a vision to transform human experiences and outcomes in wellness and media and entertainment. Gopi has authored a book on innovation titled Smash, S-M-A-S-H, Innovation, currently in its 2nd edition. He received his master's and PhD degrees in electrical engineering from Iowa State University. Please welcome our keynote speaker for tonight.
Thank you, thank you. Thanks, David. It's a pleasure and privilege being here, talking in rooms where I was a student. One of the funnest class was yours, because we were working on 3D models and fighter jets and creating landscapes, and I still would love to work in that area. And even then you had a cave at that point of time. So we had real fun here, so it's lovely being back and being amongst all of you. So I thought today I'll talk about innovation. I'll give examples from the companies I've been in, but I've also been exposed to many companies as part of learning innovation. So I actually toured and spent time with companies throughout the globe, learning how they innovate. So the lessons which I'll share are from a multitude of companies and a great number of good people. But I also wanted to make sure that I talk about innovation and how it is changing, and careers and how they're changing, and what is important for you. Mohammed emphasized this enough, and Narayan talked about it again, is that continuous learning is going to become critical. What you will take away from Iowa State is the technical capabilities of being an engineer or being a business person, and that will hold you good. But if you think that that will hold you good forever, that's where it's an issue. So you'll have to keep learning. You'll have to keep undoing certain things that you've learned in the interest of newer landscapes that you'll have to paint in a different way. As an example, the way we have built our world, engineers have built it, business people have built it, people who have understood the markets have built it. We have built it well. At the same time, the planet is not agreeing with that, right? So everything which is out there has to be reinvented. So that's an opportunity for all of you. So continuous learning is important. Mohammed again talked about being a storyteller. He didn't see my presentation, nor did I hear him speak. I think it is important, Mohammed, to be a storyteller and an artist. You asked the question about being an artist. Being innovative is to be a storyteller to yourself. You need to be convinced that what you're doing is of relevance, importance to yourself, to the communities around you, to the poorest of the poor, and be inclusive in all that you do, not only to the humankind, but all the wonderful life which makes this planet a wonderful place. Deep relationships, everybody understands, leveraging those for innovation is critical. So if I want a partner and I'm able to go and get a partner in an automotive major in India when my work is in automotive, that's critical. And being able to leverage somebody I know for 20 years is very critical. But what people do not understand, maybe, is that leverageable weak ties, and Malcolm Gladwell talks about this quite a bit, is that the ability to leverage ties that maybe you met them once, twice, but you left an impression where they're ready to help you, and also that means you are ready to help them. And they have a view of you that they trust you, right? These relationships are very critical in innovation as well. Connected with the planet, we already talked about it, but really innovation, corporate or academic these days, if you are not thinking about the environmental impact, then we are falling short. And as leaders, be it innovators or be it corporate leaders or academic leaders, I think it's important for us to think of ourselves as custodians and not owners of the area that we have been entrusted with. So that's what I say here, so I'm not going to repeat that again. But wanted to spend some time in these areas, and I'm not going to read the list out here, but we will talk about them, each one from a different company. I talked about this earlier, which is in order to innovate, you need to have 3 actions which you're working on. One is create, one is nurture, and one is change. The confusion, especially when we start off on our innovation journey, is that we think an idea and creativity is what innovation is about. It is, but it is a starting point. I've seen the best of innovators are not the best idea makers. They actually take the idea from someone else. You think about Steve Jobs, most of his ideas came from someone else, but he is a great innovator, right? So it is important, the idea, don't get me wrong, but many people just get stuck thinking that an idea is an innovation. An idea is different than an invention is different from an innovation, right? An idea is something new. An invention is something new that you can show can be put into use and legally protected because it is novel and there are various other criteria behind it. But innovation is only when you have taken it to value. It need not be into the market. It can be into an academic world, and you have created value that so many faculty or so many students are using this and hence producing value. But what happened? Yeah, sorry. Can I go back? Yeah, sorry, I'll do that. Yeah, sorry about that. So I was talking about that and creativity, but it's also important to realize that you spend a lot of time taking that idea, whosoever idea it is, into the market, into the academic world. And it's important to emphasize that. And of course, when we are the most successful, you have to change. So the nurture comes with passion, change with detachment. These are uniquely associated mindsets, right? Now you might ask me, why not create with passion? Because if you bring in passion too early, then you are stopping other ideas from coming in. You get tied down to one idea, and you're stopping the other ideas to come in. So it's important to understand, and you might not agree, but at least I would invite you to think about it. When you create with freedom. Not only freedom for yourself, but freedom for letting ideas flow in from any direction. When you're nurturing, it's no longer time to be open to all these ideas and still keep evaluating ideas, because then you become an idea person and you'll not be able to take something into the value domain. And when you change, there's no point in thinking that I'll keep this part of it, that part of it. I think it's most important to just get on to the next, instead of a Walkman, go into the magnetic memory iPod or whatever it is, because there is no Walkman element in the iPod, other than the fact that it can play back, right? And so that is critical to think through. I'll just walk up here. Yeah. So the next few slides, I'm going to be talking about creating and giving you examples from different companies. Creating in terms of learning from the end customer, you are best served by picking it up from the FMCG segment. So Procter & Gamble wanted to bring their diapers to China. And it was a simple thought that, big country, a lot of babies, they need diapers. And they were not wrong. They sat in their headquarters and decided that, let's think about what diapers do they need. They need low-cost diapers because it's a low-cost country. Nothing wrong in their thinking. They went into the Shanghai market with low-cost diapers, and they really couldn't sell any. What they didn't realize was this. Anybody recognize what these are? Yeah, but actually they're diapers. So they're called Kai Dang Ku. Have you been in China? So I can pronounce it anyway and get away. Yeah, so they are actually diapers with a split in the right in the middle. So when the child squats, it doesn't get wet, right? So the Chinese were using these diapers, and there's no diaper rash associated with this. So they said, we are not using diapers which produce a diaper rash. So the Procter & Gamble realized it slowly that they need to do something else. So they didn't give up. They went back into the market, and they spent time with the customers. So they lived with the customers there like they normally do. And they lived so close enough that they could observe that this is the reason why the diapers were not working. But in the night time, the child doesn't squat. The diaper did get wet. The baby woke up, and many marriages broke trying to figure out whether the husband or the wife does the job tonight, right? So that's when they went in with an advertorial saying that actually they created a product nighttime diaper, which had to last 8 hours versus 4 hours. So it was more expensive than the regular diaper. And they went in with an advertisement saying that you will sleep better. So why don't you put your babies in our diapers? And within 1 year of introducing in Shanghai, we are told that 90% of the Shanghai babies were wearing the Procter & Gamble diapers, right? So that is maybe completely true, maybe partially true, but really the lesson from it is absolutely true, which is in the B2C segment, in order to innovate, you need to understand your customer, right? And Narayan spent a good amount of time talking about it. A slight variation to the story is understanding, beyond understanding the market, actually driving the market to where you want it to be. So shaping the market. So Intel used to be a great example of that. Just imagine a chip maker should actually design their chips based on what the computer makers wanted them to. But it never worked like that. They would come up with the next generation chip. Computers were built around it, right? It looks normal, but it is not. And that is because they had people who predicted that, transistor density will double every 18 months. And it looks like a simple statement, but put a few statements like that together and you are able to shape the market. And that's what they were able to do. And this man was very difficult to work with, Steve Jobs. I believe nobody would ever say that they enjoyed working with him, but he really created a new age of innovation. So all respect to him. And his way of creating was to connect the dots. So if he took a calligraphy class, then he brought in multi-typeface fonts in the Mac. And he believed that every experience he had was for a reason for the future, right? So he connected the dots in all. So today, if you see Steve Jobs is no more. But he lives on in the iMac. He lives on in the iPhone. Why else would there be a garage band in a computer, which is professional quality music editing software? Why else would there be an iMovie in a computer? Just imagine, 15 years ago, did we think about making professional grade movies? We did not. Because he liked movies, he was with Pixar also, that he decided that everybody should have the opportunity to make movies. Everybody should have the opportunity to make music. Even me, I don't even understand beats, but I have produced music on GarageBand. To me, it sounds good, right? So this is the ability to connect the dots. And the passion with which he does that is, yeah, there you go. Exactly opposite of the Apple model. So it's not that one model works and that is the only model works. Look at Apple and Microsoft. Microsoft is also innovative, right? They have found new ways of creating value. So that's the definition of innovation. And their way of innovating is setting aggressive goals. One computer on every table in every home, right? Or we will solve the 20 top diseases in our lifetime. These are goals which are not SMART, which we give in corporate world. Anybody knows what is SMART goals? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. It's drilled into our heads, right? So we make sure that everybody's goals are smart. But these goals are not smart. They are aggressive. And they change the world because of what they do. And at the bottom, I'm talking about a flavor that you might want to take away in each one of the slides. I'll not be able to cover it. But here, for example, aggressive goals. Instead of setting it only on comfort, can we set it on other parameters, technology for the planet? Can we set the most aggressive goals to ensure that we are being good to the planet? Sorry. Yeah. So voice of the future, when I first used Airbnb or Uber, I was really stunned. I was amazed that somebody would rent out their bedroom from an opposite gender and be comfortable with it. And I would rent out such a room and be able to stay in there. And my dear wife wouldn't complain about it either, right? So these are things which couldn't I couldn't imagine. So the ability to develop the voice of the future is very important. So it's not that the future generation, they do not want privacy. They want privacy. At the same time, the privacy for them is an option which they exercise. They would like to have a control of their data, of their decisions. That is what many times privacy is for them. The ability to think through this and make it happen is again a way to create. This is again an old company, 3M. Communicate, otherwise a failed adhesive will not become a post-it note. Somebody who couldn't produce a gum that sticks spoke about it in a meeting, and somebody who was singing at the church choir realized that they could use it as a placeholder in their Bible, and that's how the post-it note was born. But it's not as simple as that. The company was ready to fund the amount of marketing it takes to get it into a product. Even now we use post-it notes. Yeah, moving on to nurture with passion. I'll just be with you in a second. I talked about results and action. The stressful situation at work, be it academic or corporate, is when we focus on results, and there's nothing you can do about results, because results are a lag indication. There are lead indications that you need to be working on. So the ability to break down results that you desire into actions and focusing your time on the actions is very critical. GE did it extremely well. GE, I was there with GE, so that's why Six Sigma is associated with GE. And Six Sigma was not invented in GE. It was not even the second or third. It's just that it did it so well. We had green belts, black belts, master black belts. If we purchased the company, we went in with Six Sigma flags, and we spoke the same language which nobody else understood. CTQ, how many of you know what is a CTQ? Oh, so critical to quality, right? Even if I say that, critical to quality, it still doesn't convey. But within the organization, people knew exactly what it meant. Statistically, how do you measure it, and so on. Working as a team, you learn going further and further east. So Japan is where much of the team working skills come from in its best form. So the Toyota production system has many elements where teamwork can be picked up from. One of the things when I walked the shop floor of a Toyota production system company is that their organization chart is upside down. The shop floor is on the top, the VP is at the bottom. And they think like that. When I was working with the VP, we stopped and let the worker pass because he was working on the shop floor. We were visiting, right? And that's the respect the shop floor workers had. And that is how they innovate as a team. And think and deliver scale. China is a great example. You can take Amazon also. I think equally good example. But Alibaba, when it was at its peak, right now they're going through some issues with the government. But when it was at its peak, was an epitome of how you think and deliver scale. From India, the example is that of the Tata Group, where again I spent good time. Yeah. So Jamshedji Tata started the company. 66% of the earnings of Tata Sons, which is the parent, go into charity. Right? This is just amazing. Bosch is another company I'm associated with, and they do the same. So it's not like the only company which does that, but it's one of the very few companies which does that. But the trust is also important in innovation. When Tata's needed money from the public, and you need money many times to do large-scale innovations, people opened their pockets without hesitation because they knew that the money will be put to good use. Jim, do I have a few minutes or? Yeah. Just checking. So Southwest Airlines, how many of you have gone Southwest Airlines? Yeah, they celebrate small and big wins, and many times we tend to wait for something really, really big before we celebrate, and that doesn't work. So you need to be able to celebrate the small wins. In an innovative company, people are optimistic, smiling, and are able to pull up the mood of the entire organization. If you're morose, sad, and unable to see the bright side of a rainy day, I mean, it's unlikely that that company can be innovative. Maybe it's too strong a statement, but that's definitely a belief. The ability to change, very few companies have exhibited great examples. But you learn it from the pharma sector. So pick a Pfizer, 95% of their experiments fail. But their goal is not to stop failure as much as to fail fast, so that you have not put too much money behind. And especially engineers have an ability to show that success is just around the corner. And that's a problem, because even when we know that success will not happen in the near time with this idea, we are afraid to let go because we don't know whether we'll get funding for some other idea. We have all kinds of insecurities, but that's a total disservice. The ability to fail early and to be humble and say that I do not know why this didn't work, but move on to the next idea is very critical. Netflix is a great example of disruption. When they were disrupting the market already, with CDs being mailed instead of tapes being rented, they were already at that time, when there was no bandwidth, thinking about sending movies over the internet. Yeah, I'm going to just spend 5 more minutes. Is that okay? Give me a signal if I. Okay. So now I'm going to just dive a little more granular into what's happening in the world, and one way of how you look at the future, and one way of hence how do you think about innovation. These charts can change a little bit here and there. For me, this chart I've used for 20 years. I've changed it. Every 2 or 3 years, something new will come up. On the geopolitical trends, social, consumer trends, for example, the pandemic came. And it was new, and I included it. It brought in with it social distancing. So I saw this time that even in the parking, you don't, in many places, you don't have to press a button, you just wave your hand, and it gives you the ticket. So there are things which have been influenced for good for a long time. But the way to think about this chart, I'll not go into the details because it'll take time, is that most innovation happens right to left. People need to understand the trends, the global geopolitical trends as well as consumer trends, and map it into needs which are today there but not being met perfectly, and also project into the future. Once you got this right, you got it right, because that's where innovation, if you're thinking about customer needs, this is where the needs is coming in. And then you can draw upon technology and solve those problems, and we are all smart enough to do that. But where we falter is that we only try to push technology. Pushing technology is also critical. Like a TV wouldn't maybe exist if technology was not pushed. But we need to realize that it's an 80-20. 80% of the time, we are going to be successful by going from market and receiving technology. And 20% of the time, if you're really, really good as a company or as an individual, you can push technology. As an individual, it doesn't work necessarily like that, that you make it a formula, because Steve Jobs doesn't work on a formula. So he will push whatever he wants to push. But it averages out like that. So just highlighting that it is, for all of us, it is important to understand trends. Right? We need to understand how that translates into the needs, and what does it make change. And hence, then we can go and look at the technology. Even in technology, it's important to track the science. The technology is hitting the shore change so rapidly that it can be disconcerting, and we don't know what to track. There's so much happening on the shore. But if you start early enough as a science, it is moving slow enough,
and we are able to track it. And hence we are able to, and you don't need to track everything. My role was across 2 large companies, so I had to track most of the things. But in your worlds, whatever it is, if you can start, the technology side, you start at a science level, then you can figure out which are the sciences which are going to hit the technology shores soon. Right? And this way, you meet at a point where you are able to predict the next 3 years what's going to happen, and anticipate where the ball is going to be and be there, rather than wait for something to happen and then try to very fast get there. So this has worked better for me. Again, for the engineers in the room, only this chart is that another aspect of looking at innovation is how do you get a product out, or how do you get a service out. So forgive this, only one meant only for engineers, I guess, in a way. But really, there is the foundation. More and more, the theoretical fundamentals everybody is getting. The hands-on, even in the US, you're falling behind. Right? The past generation, I would say, actually that learned from the US, the hands-on kind of work. In India, we were not hands-on. In the East, we were not hands-on. But I would say that now, even in the US, you're no longer as hands-on as the past generation. You can debate with me, and I will be wrong because you are right here. But I'm at least happy to challenge. In terms of engineering mindset, there is the component level understanding, and there is the system level understanding. More and more populations are understanding the component, they're not understanding the system. Right? So even this is a system. Understanding engineering excellence is a system. So we need to put an effort to understand innovation or engineering. And finally, in terms of execution, the ability to grow in engineering is by collaborating with yourself, with the past and with the future. This happens only if you document. And even now, I would say that US is a great example of documentation. Rest of the world, we are not as good. But there are things in the rest of the world that the US can pick up from as well. So happy to share that by country. But I just wanted to share a few examples of what's happening. This is a video which has to play. I think the video might not play, but it doesn't matter. So what you're seeing, it's okay. It's what you're seeing on the left-hand side is a low-resolution video, which on the right-hand side is being upscaled on the phone. So both are recorded on the phone, one without the upscale and one with the upscale. This is our product. So the idea being that either you can premiumize content which was never shot in 8K, you can make in 8K, if that is the end application. In this case, because it's a phone, we are showing a lower resolution. And you can also hence save on the bandwidth required. You can send across a very small footprint video, especially when metaverse becomes real, the amount of video which will traverse, when you add a dimension, the amount of data increase is just exponential. So we'll not be able to meet the ticket size, the cost of content delivery. Today, most of the OTT players are broke. In India, everybody is broke. Right? And that's because they do not charge the right price for the service they're providing, because they can't pull that from the customer. And on the other hand, they're paying the content delivery network a huge price. So some of the examples I'll share are examples of AI in its various use cases. So you'll be able to put AI on the phone, running and upscaling video in real time, consuming low power. Actually, we do that. In healthcare, again, AI, looking at collecting data on a wearable, keeping the data on your wearable or on your phone without taking it to the cloud, but giving you something as useful as chronic inflammation. Right? Chronic inflammation is an indication of future chronic disease. Right? So going beyond mere counting of steps. So you can combine so much information, bioimpedance, heart rate variability, and then a one-time database of your age, your gender, and various other factors. And we can give a lot of useful information. Let me skip through some slides, give you some flavors at least. In the developing world, it is critical to think about what is needed and build from ground up and not take a high-end product and scale it down. And so here's a Lullaby baby warmer, which in India was made 1/10 the cost with actually technology, the LED-based bilirubin technology to cure jaundice is much better than using other lighting approaches. Right, so this actually was then taken worldwide. What was done is to separate out the jaundice curing device, the baby warming device for a preterm birth, and removing many of the bells and whistles which are not required in a market which is okay to use their hands to lift the tray or things like that. In this case, actually it was more onerous. The tray had to be kept warm uniformly in India more so than in the West. If you will guess why, in India that one baby which is being shown there is never a one baby, there are 3 babies placed. So all the babies need to be getting uniform. So and a few other examples of academic research I think which will be of interest, and I'll pause after this, is work which we have done again. Things which are happening. Network science is age-old, but if you apply it to new data, social media data, identify influencers who you can go to for various things, rolling out new processes or rolling out a new product, or even seeking inputs on a new regulation. These are things which are being worked at by the work that I started at Yale. Advanced manufacturing, being able to advanced manufacturing, one of the areas was the ability to take a human being and aid them by providing them a glove which would further enable them to do things. Right? It is to not increase their workload, but the same workload to do it with less effort. But there are various other things. Advanced materials, being able to bring a material into the market, let's say in 5 years, versus 20 years, a new material itself is a big deal. And that's the kind of thing that we're working there. Biology, I said, is critical. The ability to understand the bacteria in your gut and predict preterm birth, diagnose cancer, and various other things which can be done just by looking at bacteria in your gut. Or sometimes it is a vaginal swab, depending on what you're trying to do. So that's it. I think there's a lot of excitement out there. I've shared a few flavors, and very happy again that I was able to spend some time here, and very nice meeting you again.
Very nice to see you again. Let's thank our speaker for a great presentation. Gopi, if you don't mind, I think we have time for a question or two.
Yeah, I'm here.
Anybody interested in questioning? We've got a question up here, I remember. And I love that innovation food chain slide. Go ahead.
So I'm going to ask a series of questions. You can pick one.
Oh, my goodness.
So how do you know? How do you know you're being innovative? How do you know if your research has impact? How do you measure innovation? How do you measure the value?
Yeah. All lovely questions. Yeah. No, I think I can answer them in maybe a single way. But yeah, how do you know you're being innovative? For us in the industry, if, for example, we have an ability to look at our revenues and say what mix of revenues are coming from products designed and released in the last 3 years versus 20 years ago. Right? So in GE, for example, we knew that we were in trouble because we were still selling gas turbines which were designed 20 years ago. And all the things which we designed in the last several years were not making it to the market. So you knew that you are not being innovative. So you can boil it down to some measures like that, but as an individual, again, since innovation is about finding new ways of creating value, I think measuring that value and not counting it until you're able to measure that value is the way to think about it. Yeah.
Hello, Gopi. I think you said you have started an AI company.
That's right.
And the areas are like entertainment and health, right? which is quite interesting. So there is an area that came to my mind as you were discussing AI. You know, in today's world, it has become very difficult for humans to know what the truth is. And truth, you know, unless there is a trust, the human society, it would become very chaotic, right? The media gives you information, and that information, you don't know what is true or what is false, right? And especially for children who are growing up today, you know, they need this skill, and even adults need this skill. So can you think of how AI is again, you know, has become a term that we continue to use for anything and everything, but basically computers can do computations, and that computations can help you. And how can we develop a product where computer does computations and which helps human in narrowing down what is true?
Yeah. So there is what is true and there is what is left, right, and center. So there is left, right, and center is left, right, and center. So it's a view which cannot be binary, right? So there is various shades of gray. So I think it's once we realize that, I think there is an ability to look at fake news for sure, look at deep fakes for sure. It's still not there. So if somebody wants to morph my image doing something really naughty with your face, people will believe that it is Professor Kothari doing this. But the technology exists. It's the question of...
Give you an example. So for example, there was a news few days, it has been there around, that United Nations had you know, the national anthems were ranked, and India happens to be the top in the national anthem ranking. Something like that you can easily fact check. But there are other things which are a lot harder to fact check, and some humans have the ability to ask questions, the right questions. So I'm really talking about giving the ability to humans to ask good questions.
Yeah. No, I think that you're absolutely right. The ability for humans to ask, but also the ability to triangulate what is coming from an authenticated source. And you know, there are various things which need to happen, which need to be counterbalanced with the ability of individuals to choose their source of news, unfortunately. If individuals pick a particular source of news and they're constantly being fed a certain flavor of the news, I don't see how we can, you know, intervene there. But if individuals want to know whether this is authentic or not, technology is there to help. We have not yet built it, I guess, because the demand for that is just emerging, but it is there. I'll give you an example, if that's okay.
No, please.
So during the elections in India, there was a party which reached out to us to get to understand what is truly the mood of the population. And through multiple, so natural language processing, which is also AI, child of AI, and various other techniques, we were able to give them views which they would never get from party insiders, because only good news will go from party insiders.
Great questions, and I hope the AI can come up with that news filter. It would be really helpful. 5 years ago, there was a great book called Weapons of Math Destruction.
Yeah,
That's a great book about the ethics of AI, but you answered those questions great. Let's give Gopi another big hand for a really interesting talk. At this point, it is awards time. So I'm going to ask Matt Nelson to come up here with Paul Post. We are fortunate to have John Deere. Paul represents John Deere, that funded the Make to Innovate Lab of the Future Challenge. So we had 4 teams presenting this afternoon, and we had a panel of judges, and it was an interesting gathering. So I stepped away during the judging, so this is a surprise for me, but there's $10,000 on the table. We'll see where they land. So get ready.
Yeah, thank you, John Deere. We're happy to sponsor Make to Innovate. So at John Deere, we make and we innovate. So this is a perfect name for a program for us to participate in. As Jim said, we listened to 4 interesting proposals today, and the way we're going to send out the money is maybe a little different than what any of the 4 teams might expect. 2 of the teams, we really liked elements of both of 2 of the teams, and our recommendation is that those 2 teams join forces and come back to us with a combined proposal. So Salty Spittoon and Tyler, could you please come up?
Outstanding.
So thank you, congratulations, and we look forward to the proposal.
And I'll just real quick, just again, a big thank you, of course, to John Deere for all of the support and everything. And yeah, this competition was super fun. I want to thank all the teams that submitted. You guys all had really good ideas. I mean, we spent 20 minutes, I think, kind of going over different options. And I just want to, again, let's thank all of the teams that participated this afternoon. So.
Thank you, Paul and Matt. Here we go. I will make a plug for tomorrow is Feed the World Day. We also have our Innovation Fund Challenge. David Slump will be here, and he's one of the motivators, actually one of the founders of our Innovation Fellows program. Lots of activities on track for tomorrow. And on Friday, we wrap up with a big celebration. Tan Lee will be here as a keynote speaker. She's the founder of Emotive, which is a brain computer interface company, really cool stuff. So lots of good things coming on Thursday and Friday. And I want to remind everyone that we have some refreshments outside. You can visit with our dignitaries here and each other and network. So please enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you all for attending. Look forward to seeing you all Thursday and Friday. Bye for now.